So the question is, how many of you teach science fiction in any regard? Okay, one of you. All right. That's good, right? All right, here's the next question. How many of you have read Ray Bradbury? Okay, more hands. Specifically Martian Chronicles? Okay. How many of you have read C.S. Lewis? Ah, yes, more hands. And how many of you have read the Ransom trilogy? Any part of it? Okay, good. How many of you have read Edgar Rice Burroughs? Oh, that was 3 hands. That was more than the first session, right? So, hey, we're cooking with gas at this point, right? I like it. Princess of Mars? Okay, yeah, good. All right, good. So we've got some familiarity. That's great and helpful. Here's the next question. How many of you read aloud with your students? Are you going to hang out? Okay. This whole row, essentially. Elementary school? Elementary? Yeah.
13th grade, college.
Okay, college, yeah. So I want to emphasize this for a second. Notice that jump. How many of you in here teach in between 6th and 12th? So just 2 of you. Mark, do you read out loud with your students?
Yeah, when I was teaching literature, we read everything out loud together.
You did everything out loud together?
Yes.
Good. How about you?
Yeah.
Yeah? Is that a Thales policy or just something you do?
No, it's a Thales policy.
Okay, good. Thales has good policies. I like that, right? One of the things that I want to try and model today in the brief time that we have is what I call communal reading, right? I call it that because that's what it's called. I didn't invent the term. And it's an approach to reading and understanding that I think is fundamentally dialectic in its approach, very close to what Plato and Aristotle are all about. But also I think it is essential to the classical aspect of pedagogy, right? So we're going to do some reading aloud. I'm going to ask you to do some reading aloud. I think that'll be good. You'll be fine. Strange names, it's okay even if you get them wrong, right? You're like, Deja who? I don't know, right? It's fine. It really will be fine. But in addition to that, we're going to be digging into science fiction. So the question is kind of like, why science fiction? Why 20th century stories about Mars, right? At a conference on classical education. I think that'll become self-apparent, but I do want to just share a couple of thoughts about that, kind of lay a framework before we dive in. And I want to start with a quote from Isaac Asimov. Now, in the previous session, almost nobody knew who Isaac Asimov was. I heard the sigh, right? How about in this session? Do we have people who know who Asimov was? Okay, a few. Good, right? That's a higher percentage.
Was he Dyson Sphere? Was he Dyson Sphere?
Dyson Sphere?
No.
No. Yeah.
So Russian expat.
Right. iRobot, right, with Will Smith, early 2000s. I might be dating myself, I'm not sure. Terrible movie, really great set of short stories that Asimov wrote. Famous for the laws of robotics, right, which have become kind of real popular in currency again because of AI, right? People are talking about this, right? People are talking about this concept of how you limit and structure AI. And I don't know if it's ironic or just tragic, but they look to a science fiction writer who specifically warned about developing AI in order to figure out how to circumvent that. Doesn't work in Asimov's stories. I'm not sure, what you're going to do. But he had this to say, and I think this is a helpful starting point. Individual science fiction stories may seem as trivial as ever to the blinder critics and philosophers of today. But the core of science fiction, its essence, the concept around which it revolves, has become crucial for our salvation if we are to be saved at all. Now, I think Asimov maybe overstates a bit about what science fiction can do, particularly depending on what we mean by crucial to our salvation. I think for Asimov, it was an entirely physical salvation. He's not speaking metaphysically, right? And he doesn't mean the salvation of your soul. He means the salvation of our world, our planet. And there's something to that, maybe in some minor ways, but it's helpful to balance that against something C.S. Lewis wrote in a similar vein. It is sobering and cathartic to remember now and then our collective smallness, our apparent isolation, the apparent indifference of nature, the slow biological, geological, and astronomical processes which may, in the long run, make many of our hopes, possibly some of our fears, ridiculous. And I think that ties back to Dr. Simon's talk really well at the end. How many of you can name Danish kings? Probably not a lot. But how many of you can name your mother? Hopefully all of you, right? We have to take these things in stride. Often people think that speculative fiction, science fiction, is really this grand quest to kind of outline the future of mankind. But it's actually focused on something more singular, something smaller, which is what Bradbury calls the impossible questions. Who are we? What are we? Where have we been? And where are we going? Right? Now, so we're going to try to see in these texts if some of these questions can be answered. And I want to go ahead and kind of prep you, right, as we're going to try to model this, right? One of the things we're interested in today is thinking about what it means to be human, right? This is why I chose 3 stories about Mars at a conference on humanism, right? Because I think all 3 of these speak very specifically to this concept, right? What does it mean to be human? What are the things that define the human experience, right? If we had more time, we could take like some kind of open-ended survey here, right? But I think it'd be best if we just jump right into it. And so you have in front of you a packet. The packet is stapled, which makes things much easier. You want this page. We're going to go in chronological order, despite Dr. Hankins' admonition, very first thing this morning. Not necessarily because it will improve anything to move chronologically, but because I do think in maybe providential ways, these stories build upon one another. So, Princess of Mars, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Okay, and I've given you this whole chapter, Champion in Chief, which is chapter 10 from the first book of the Barsoom series. There were 12 books, I think, in total, right? A couple of short stories thrown in there. And I'm sure some of you are familiar with the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and how all these things tie in, right? Burroughs was doing this long before anybody was even dreaming of something called Marvel Comics, right? You've got Tarzan, you've got Barsoom, you've got Pellucidar, which is the world that actually exists inside the Earth's core, right? And then you've got Venus, which is a whole nother planet with a whole nother set of races. And all of these places are actually interconnected throughout the stories. There's actually like conversations between John Carter and Tarzan at different times, and then Tarzan goes to the Earth's core. There's all kinds of interesting things, right? So if you like shared universes, Burroughs is your guy, right? But we're not going to actually read the whole chapter. We're going to jump in media res as best we can. So for those of you who don't know, John Carter, Civil War veteran, living out west trying to make his fortune in the later part of the 1800s, goes into a cave, being chased by some very hostile Native Americans, and he dies, right? Dies in this cave. Only he doesn't die. He wakes up on Mars, naked. Not sure how he got there, not sure why he's there, certainly not sure why he's naked, right? And to his surprise, he discovers that Mars is actually inhabited, right? It is not the dead, barren planet that he thought it was, but there are people there. Now, they are 9 feet tall, green-skinned, and they have 4 arms, but they are a kind of people, right? And he quickly falls in to kind of become one of their vassals, so to speak. And so we're going to pick up in a chapter just after, because Mars is inhabited by multiple people groups, right? We have the red Martians and the green Martians. These are the 2 dominant groups. There are also black Martians, yellow Martians, white Martians, and some others thrown in there for good measure. White apes. There's plant men, as my son reminded me earlier. There's guys who have bodies but no heads, right? It gets really complicated, right? But it all works out. It all works out. So really all that you need to know is that there's John Carter. He's an Earthman, and he lives on Mars, right? So we're going to pick up on page 90, not 94. Yeah, 94. Let's pick up on 94. So this is directly after a battle. Some red Martians have been taken captive, and Carter's kind of trying to figure out what exactly is going to happen to them now that they've been captured. What are these green, warlike Martians going to do? Right? I'm going to try to model some reading, right? So reading for emphasis, trying to pronounce some of the names to give you some concept in case you look at the names and go, that doesn't make any sense. You got to make this stuff up when you're writing fiction, I guess. So one Martian in particular is under trial. We're going to hear her speak in just a second. We're going to pick up first full paragraph, middle of the page, seeing being the first word. Seeing that the prisoner seemed the center of attraction, I halted to view the proceedings. I had not long to wait, for presently Lorquas Tommel and his retinue of chieftains approached the building and, signing the guards to follow with the prisoner, entered the audience chamber. Realizing that I was a somewhat favored character and also convinced that the warriors did not know of my proficiency in their language, as I had pled with Sola to keep this a secret on the grounds that I did not wish to be forced to talk with the men until I had perfectly mastered the Martian tongue, I chanced an attempt to enter the audience chamber and listen to the proceedings. The council squatted upon the steps of the rostrum, while below them stood the prisoner and her two guards. I saw that one of the women was Sarcoja, and thus understood how she had been present at the hearing of the preceding day, the results of which had been reported to the occupants of our dormitory last night. Her attitude toward the captive was most harsh and brutal. When she held her, she sunk her rudimentary nails into the poor girl's flesh, or twisted her arm in a most painful manner. When it was necessary to move from one spot to another, she either jerked her roughly or pushed her headlong before her. She seemed to be venting upon this poor, defenseless creature all the hatred, cruelty, ferocity, and spite of her 900 years, backed by unguessable ages of fierce and brutal ancestors. The other woman was less cruel because she was entirely indifferent. If the prisoner had been left to her alone, and fortunately she was at night, she would have received no harsh treatment, nor by the same token would she have received any attention at all. As Lorquas Tommel raised his eyes to address the prisoner, they fell on me, and he turned to Tars Tarkas with a word and gesture of impatience. Tars Tarkas made some reply which I could not catch, but which caused Lorquas Tommel to smile, after which they paid no further attention to me. "What is your name?" asked Lorquas Tommel, addressing the prisoner. "Deja Thoris, daughter of Mors Kajik of Helium." "And the nature of your expedition?" he continued. "It was a purely scientific research party sent out by my father's father, the Jeddak of Helium, to re-chart the air currents and to take atmospheric density tests," replied the fair prisoner in a low, well-modulated voice. "We were unprepared for battle," she continued, "as we were on a peaceful mission, as our banners and the colors of our craft denoted. The work we were doing was as much in your interest as in ours, for you know full well that were it not for our labors and the fruit of our scientific operations, there would not be enough air or water on Mars to support a single human life. For ages we have maintained the air and water supply at practically the same point, without an appreciable loss, and we have done this in the face of the brutal and ignorant interference of you green men. Why, oh why, will you not learn to live in amity with your fellows? Must you ever go on down the ages to your final extinction, but little above the place of the dumb brutes that serve you? A people without written language, without art, without homes, without love, the victims of eons of the horrible community idea. Owning everything in common, even to your women and children, has resulted in your owning nothing in common. You hate each other as you hate all else except yourselves. Come back to the ways of our common ancestors. Come back to the light of kindliness and fellowship. The way is open to you. You will find the hands of the red men stretched out to aid you. Together, we may do still more to regenerate our dying planet. The granddaughter of the greatest and mightiest of the red Jedaks has asked you, will you come? All right, I'm going to stop there for just a second. What do you see? What do you observe in the text? I've thrown you in the middle of a chapter, in the middle of a book that most of you have not read or probably even heard of. What have you learned? What words have stood out? What do you need to find? I know it's late, but you can do this.
Green Martians are a bit savage.
Okay, good, right? Green Martians are savage, right? Even the females treat prisoners rudely. What else?
Red Martians have some concept of private property.
Okay.
Green Martians do not.
There you go.
They seem
Yeah.
kind of, I'm seeing a little bit of Plato and the.
Oh, good catch. Yes.
All in common.
Right. Yes. Communism is what is often pinpointed here, and I don't doubt that communism is probably fresh on Burroughs' mind. 1912 is when the novel is written, right? So communist revolution kind of coming soon, right? So communism is on the rise, but it hasn't taken off yet, right? It's not yet the great threat that would eventually become, the Cold War, right?
It's more feudal. It was like lore clause and
Yeah.
the greatest Jakal or some kind of noble title.
So possibly some feudalism. Yeah, I could see that. Lorquas is his name. So what's the term for rulers? Jeddak, right? Yeah, Jeddak is, and what we learn of the Green Martians in a different chapter is actually that among the Green Martians, the Jeddak who has the strongest fist is the one who's in charge, right? Very much so, right? Which is why John Carter ends up in charge at one point, because Mars gives him a supernatural strength, which is helpful for his small frame, right? And it makes for good television. So you've got those kinds of things going on, right? We've got some philosophical concepts. I do think we see some evidence of Burroughs being exposed to Plato for sure, and of course the specter of communism that's on the rise in Europe at that stage. What else? Anything else?
There's a common ancestor mentioned, which I think is interesting.
Yes.
Implying that they're all related.
Good, yes, right. So she implies that they all come from the same stock, right? That so the red Martians look just like normal Earthlings, right? We skipped over the bit where John Carter first sees Deja Thoris, and he's like immediately smitten, right? So she is the princess of Mars, and he spends this book and the next two essentially trying to rescue her from peril. Although, as you can see, she doesn't lack for defending herself by any stretch of the imagination. But yes, right? So despite the fact Green Martians, tall, 4 arms, right? Red Martians, small, 2 arms, even despite these physical differences, there is still this idea that we come from a common ancestry, that we share the planet, we inhabit it together, we speak the same language, right? And therefore that makes us more like family than enemies, right? Which is a very interesting concept. What does she specifically note that they are without? Culture, right? What does she seem to say implies culture?
Art.
Okay, art. She specifically says you don't have art. Good. What else?
Language. Love.
So, written language, right? Yeah. Love. Very good, right? Homes, right? The Green Martians, they're nomadic people, right? So they don't have permanent homes, right? Yes, all of that's very good. Written language is really important, not only to this story, but actually to the language in general, to the other two that we're going to read as well. But here's another reason to think about language. What have we learned about John Carter? That is a secret.
That you can understand them.
That he understands their language, but doesn't want them to know, right? So that raises all kinds of interesting questions, right? The fact that he has endeavored, of his own accord, to learn their language quickly. Language is kind of this thing that unites all of the peoples of Barsoom. They all speak a common tongue, despite the fact that they have very different ways of living, right? Red Martians gather in large cities. They have skyships. It's quite interesting, right?
Was Burroughs a contemporary with James Clavell?
That's a good question. I don't know who that is.
He wrote Shogun, and there's something the same where the protagonist is like, don't let them know I speak Spanish.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. When is he writing? So Burroughs wrote from the 1890s to about the 1940s.
I think he was
Yeah.
late 19th century. I think it was after the steamships, after our ironclads broke up in Japan, I think.
Okay, yeah. So they would have been contemporaries then. I don't know if they had any exposure to one another, but maybe, right? Burroughs was at one point easily the most recognized American writer because his stuff was in magazines all the time, right? I mean, all of his stuff was serialized, right? He was kind of like our Dickens, but he wrote about Mars and Tarzan, right? Yeah, so no Christmas Carol going on here. That's okay, though. That's okay, right? So good stuff there. All right, I want to go ahead and jump, though, right? So there's more that can be said about A Princess of Mars. You should feel free to pick it up. Let's flip over to Lewis, Out of the Silent Planet, right? Moving chronologically. 1938, Out of the Silent Planet is published, right, in its first printing. Some of you may know this story. Lewis was reading science fiction and was constantly frustrated and flummoxed by what he saw as weaknesses in the genre. And so he resolved to write the kind of story he wanted to read, right? And so that was what happened. How many of you knew Lewis wrote science fiction? Okay, a few of you, good, right? How many of you have read the Chronicles of Narnia? Almost every hand. Oh, that's so good, right? Yes, everyone should read the Chronicles of Narnia, preferably in publication order. It's not like it's a huge moral failing to read them in chronological order, except that it is. So you should definitely read them in the publication order. But that we can talk about that another time, maybe. So background for this. Elwyn Ransom is the main character. He's a philologist. He's an academic from Earth. That'll become really apparent pretty quickly. And he was out on a walking tour of England, as English folk are wont to do. And he finds himself kidnapped by an old college friend. Again, something that happens normally, right? He's on a spaceship, taken to Mars. Turns out he is going to be a human sacrifice for a race called the Sorns. But he finds an avenue to escape. And so we're picking up in the midst of his escape. We're not going to read the whole chapter. We don't have time. Time is our great time. The war rages ever on, right? As Bradbury liked to say. So we're going to start actually on, let's go with, I'm having a hard time keeping track of the page numbers here. Let's go with page 56. So he's been hiding himself in the grass, trying to get away from, it turns out there are multiple races of creatures on Malacandra, which is the local name for Mars, right? And Sorns are these big, tall, kind of creepy-looking, palish people. They turn out to be shepherds. We'll talk about that later, maybe. But he's been hiding in the grass, and this kind of otter-looking creature pops up, and he's hiding from it. Does not want to be seen by whatever this thing is. It looks big. It looks scary. So page 56, first full paragraph that says, then something. Do I have someone who would like to read? Go ahead, Mark.
Then something happened which completely altered his state of mind. The creature, which was still steaming and shaking itself on the back and had obviously not seen him, opened his mouth and began to make noises. This in itself was not remarkable, but a lifetime of linguistic study assured Ransom almost at once that these were articulate noises. The creature was talking. It had a language. If you are not yourself a philologist, I'm afraid you must take it on trust. The prodigious emotional consequences of this realization in Ransom's mind. A new world he had already seen, but a new, extraterrestrial, a non-human language was a different matter. Somehow he had not thought of this in connection with the Sorns. Now it flashed upon him like a revelation. The love of knowledge is a kind of madness. In the fraction of a second which it took Ransom to decide that the creature was really talking, and while he still knew that he might be facing instant death, his imagination had leaped over every fear and hope and probability of his situation to follow the dazzling project of making a Malacandrian grammar, an introduction to the Malacandrian language, the lunar verb, a concise Martian English dictionary. The titles flitted through his mind. And what might one not discover from the speech of a non-human race? The very form of language itself, the principle behind all possible languages, might fall into his hands. Unconsciously, he raised himself on his elbow and stared at the black beast. It became silent. The huge bullet head swung round and lustrous amber eyes fixed him. There was no wind on the lake or in the wood. Minute after minute, in utter silence, the representatives of two so far divided species stared each into the other's face.
All right, very good. I'm going to stop you there. What do you see? What do you observe? What sticks out to you? You can laugh at Ransom. You can laugh with Ransom.
He's about to die and he's excited about writing a new book.
He's a university professor, right? Tenure is ever on his mind, right? Death is right there, and he's like, "Ooh, I wonder if I can get this peer-reviewed." Right? I mean, that's what's happening. That's right? The love of knowledge is a kind of madness. If I ever get a tattoo, it'll be that. Right? What else?
The creature that he's looking at, I think it's interesting, at least in this paragraph, like we get hints of description, like enough that makes me think, okay, it's something weird, something alien. But I don't get a terribly clear picture in my head of what this animal looks like from this paragraph, at least.
That's right. And we did skip his initial impression, right, a couple of paragraphs earlier, right? And of course, if we had more time, we could read on. This is a race of creatures known as the Rasa, and Ransom will end up living with them for a short while on Malacandra. So for those of you who might be so inclined, you should definitely go read this whole book because it's worth your time. Yeah, good. What else?
John Carter has a connection already with the Martians because he's learned their language.
Mm-hmm.
And Ransom here is like, ooh, I want this connection so I want to learn their language.
Right. And so it's very interesting because in Burroughs, what we saw is, so Carter even says, I don't want to reveal it until I can speak it perfectly. There's this kind of sense of respectability that comes along with learning a language and then being able to communicate with it, right? He doesn't mind listening, right? But Carter doesn't really want to try and speak it until he's got a good handle on it, right? Ransom, as a philologist, seems a totally different situation, right? Like he's alone, he's abandoned. He knows how he got to Mars, and it was not pleasant. And just the thought of communion makes him excited. And as you would see if you continue to read, I mean, he's willing to stumble and get words wrong and all kinds of things. Well, I have a good friend who taught English in China for a few years, and one of his favorite stories to tell was on his first few days there, he was in a cab, he was going to go to the zoo, and if you know anything about Mandarin, it's kind of a touchy language, right? And so he was trying to explain to the cab driver that he wanted to go see the pandas. He was real excited to go see the pandas. I don't know the Mandarin word for panda, but apparently whatever it is also very close to something that is a bit unsavory. And so he's in the back of this cab saying, I want to go see the pandas. I want to go see the pandas. And the cabbie's just laughing, right? Because he knows, right? He knows, like you don't really know what you're saying right now. So the cabbie explained to him, you have to say the word this way, otherwise you mean this other thing. And it was like, oh, right? So the ability to communicate clearly and well, really important. And language is a key part of that. Let's read on just a little bit more. You go ahead, you wanted to read. Yeah.
Yeah.
So picking up at Ransom rose.
Ransom rose to his knees. The creature leaped back, watching him intently, and then became motionless again. Then it came a pace nearer, and Ransom jumped up and retreated, but not far. Curiosity held him. He summoned up his courage and advanced, holding out his hand. The beast misunderstood the gesture. It backed into the shallows of the lake, and he could see the muscles tightened under its sleek pelt, ready for sudden movement. But there it stopped. It, too, was in the grip of curiosity. Neither dared let the other approach, yet each repeatedly felt the impulse to do so himself and yielded to it. It was foolish, frightening, ecstatic, and unbearable all in one moment. It was more than curiosity. It was like a courtship, like the meeting of the first man and the first woman in the world. It was like something beyond that. So natural is the contact of sexes, so limited the strangeness, so shallow the reticence, so mild the repugnance to be overcome, compared with the first tingling intercourse of two different but rational species. The creature suddenly turned and began walking away. A disappointment like despair smote Ransom. "Come back!" he shouted in English. The thing turned, spread out its arms, and spoke again in its unintelligible language. Then it resumed its progress. It had not gone more than 20 yards away when Ransom saw it stoop down and pick something up. It returned. In its hand, he was already thinking of its webbed forepaw as a hand, it was carrying what appeared to be a shell, the shell of some oyster-like creature, but rounder and more deeply domed. It dipped the shell into the lake and raised it full of water. Then it held the shell to its own middle and seemed to be pouring something into the water. Ransom thought with disgust that it was urinating in the shell. Then he realized that the protuberances on the creature's belly were not genital organs, nor organs at all. It was wearing a kind of girdle, hung with various pouch-like objects, and it was adding a few drops of liquid from one of these to the water in the shell. This done, it raised the shell to its black lips and drank, not throwing back its head like a man, but bowing it and sucking like a horse. When it had finished, it refilled the shell and, once again, added a few drops from the receptacle. It seemed to be some kind of skin bottle at its waist. Supporting the shell in its two arms, it extended them towards Ransom. The intention was unmistakable. Hesitantly, almost shyly, he advanced and took the cup. His fingertips touched the webbed membrane of the creature's paws, and an indescribable thrill of mingled attraction and repulsion ran through him. Then he drank. Whatever had been added to the water was plainly alcoholic. He had never enjoyed a drink so much.
All right, we'll stop there for a second, right? What do you see? What do you learn? How have we advanced our knowledge of Ransom, of Malacandra, of what it means to be human? What are your thoughts? You've got something, I can tell. No?
The first thing I think is humans stop nomading and become civilized to grow food or to brew beer.
Yes, it's true, right? Like, yeah, it's quite funny. What's the first thing he does the Rasa does to make friends? Offers him a drink, right? Like, yes. He could have just offered him water, right? But he doesn't. He offers him something a little bit more potent, which I think is interesting.
Well, it's clear by this point, this is not a beast. I mean,
Right.
This is something that can be curious,
Mm-hmm.
and that can add something. So there's some manual dexterity somehow. I mean, the previous description, I'm sort of imagining something like out of the Alien versus Predator universe, like a swivel head thing.
Yeah.
But now we've got something that can add like drops to a drink
Mhm.
and can share. Like we're getting more and more intentionality and agency in there.
That's good, right? And we see Ransom's transition as well. So he describes it as a beast in the previous section we read. But here, what does he call it? It's a hand, right? He was already beginning to think of it as a hand before he had realized it was offering him a drink, right? Like we get to kind of see his own adaptation to the scenario, right? This thing that is completely foreign to him is going to become something intimate, right? Something close to him. Spoiler alert. So this is a beast, a creature called Huoi, right? That's his name, and he will turn out to be a great hunter and a great poet, in which Ransom will learn some of his poetry, right? As time goes on.
At the same time, like we also get, you asked what do we learn about being human.
Yeah.
We get like a really funny I mean, I think it's pretty funny. Like extended simile was like a courtship, like the meeting of the first man and the first woman in the world. Like this is not, this is not anything sexual, but Lewis kind of reaches for that sort of vocabulary.
Yeah.
Even to compare with the first tingling intercourse of two different irrational species.
Right.
He's putting it in that register.
And I think it's
weird.
because that's the closest we can really come, right? Like, we haven't actually encountered alien life, right? There's not a completely separate rational species for us to engage with. But men and women are about as close to that resemblance as we get to in our experience. And I think Lewis is right to kind of emphasize that and use that as a starting point, right? So whatever you feel here, it's so much more on this level, trying to understand and reckon with something totally foreign, something totally other. Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, we're going to jump because time, my time got cut. You can take that up with Josh. But no, it's good. So we're going to jump over to Bradbury, right? Martian Chronicles. So 1912, Edgar Rice Burroughs. 1938, C.S. Lewis. This is 1950, the Martian Chronicles. Now, you can buy the Martian Chronicles in a new copy if you go to Barnes & Noble or whatever. They've got, these fresh, crisp, new editions out. But if you start off looking on even if you just look at the table of contents, you'll see January 1999, September 2005, right? You're going, oh, these have already happened, right? That's true. This is the copy you want. If you see a copy that's got updated dates and they're further ahead than we are today, don't buy that copy. I mean, unless you're going to buy it and throw it away. That's fine, right? You're welcome to do that. But what you really do want is you want the copy that is the older one, right? So the one that takes us back into the past instead of into the future. And there's lots of reasons for that, but that's the best I can give you for now because we're short on time. Okay. We're going to start. Let's see. We're going to read August 2002. It's a story called Night Meeting. And let's begin. Let's begin on page 80. We'll begin in the middle of the page. Right, so page 80 begins with the word kaleidoscopes. We're not going to start there, though. Right. We're going to begin third full paragraph. There was is what's going to start us off. And do I have a reader who would like to read a little bit? Go for it. Yes.
There was a smell of time in the air tonight. He smiled and turned to the fancy in his mind. There was a thought. What did time smell like? Like dust and clocks and people. And if you wondered what time sounded like, it sounded like water running in a dark cave and voices crying and dirt dropping down upon hollow box lids and rain. And going further, what did time look like? Time looked like snow dropping silently into a black room, or it looked like a silent film in an ancient theater. 100 billion faces falling like those New Year balloons. Down and down into nothing. That was how time smelled and looked and sounded. And tonight, Tomas shoved a hand into the wind outside the truck. Tonight you could almost touch time.
Yeah, keep going.
He drove the truck between hills of time. His neck prickled and he sat up, watching ahead. He pulled into a little dead Martian town, stopped the engine, and let the silence come in around him. He sat, not breathing, looking out at the white buildings in the moonlight. Uninhabited for centuries, perfect, faultless, in ruins, yes, but perfect nevertheless.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. So, again, I've dropped you into the middle of things. What's going on?
Apparently he's already on Mars.
All right, so we're already on Mars. We've got somebody who's there. Tomas. Are there Martians there? There were, right? So there were Martians there. There doesn't seem to be any more, right? How does he describe the Martian town? in ruins, right? Uninhabited for centuries. So it's been a while. When the story first begins, people are landing on Mars. There are Martians there. They're already dwindling in number, right? They've been there for a long time, and they're kind of fading, very similar to what we see in A Princess of Mars. But then when humans arrive, they bring sickness. Martians can't resist, and they succumb to the sickness, right? So very quickly in Martian Chronicles, Martians are all gone, right? And so Tomas is kind of into this settling of the red planet, and he arrives here. Let's jump over to page 81, right? You're going to skip just a couple of paragraphs. It's all beautiful. I would love to spend more time there, but we're going to pick up towards the top. Tomas turns slowly. Josh, why don't you read for us for a minute?
Tomas turned slowly with the coffee cup in his hand, and out of the hills came a strange thing. It was a machine like a jade-green insect, a praying mantis, delicately rushing through the cold air, indistinct, countless green diamonds winking over its body, and red jewels that glittered with multifaceted eyes. Its 6 legs fell upon the ancient highway with the sounds of a sparse rain which dwindled away, and from the back of the machine, a Martian with melted gold for eyes looked down at Tomas as if he were looking into a well. Tomas raised his hand and thought, "Hello," automatically, but did not move his lips, for this was a Martian. But Tomas had swam in blue rivers on earth, with strangers passing on the road, and had eaten in strange houses with strange people, and his weapon had always been his smile. He did not carry a gun, and he did not feel the need of one now, even with the little fear that gathered about his heart at this moment. The Martian's hands were empty too. For a moment, they looked across the cool air at each other. It was Tomas who moved first. "Hello," he called. "Hello," called the Martian in his own language. They did not understand each other. Did you say hello?" they both asked. "What did you say?" they said, each in a different tongue. They scowled. "Who are you?" said Tomas in English. "What are you doing here?" in Martian. The stranger's lips moved. "Where are you going?" they said, and looked bewildered. "I'm Tomas Gomez. I'm Muheka." Neither understood, but they tapped their chests with the words, and then it became clear.
All right, so we'll stop there for just a second. What's automatically a little bit different by what we have going on from the other two stories? Or at least from where we began.
They don't understand each other.
Right, like the misunderstanding is actually central, right? Yeah. So they want to understand each other. They're trying, but they just can't, right? So, but again, you see that commonality of language, right? And you've got to love Tomas's weapon. What is it that keeps him safe when he encounters strange things?
Smile.
Smile, right? A smile. All right, let's keep going a little bit. Who wants to read? All right, here, I'll read just a little bit. And then the Martian laughed. "Wait!" Tomas felt his head touched, but no hand had touched him. "There," said the Martian in English. "That is better. You learned my language so quick." Nothing at all. They looked, embarrassed with the new silence, at the steaming coffee he had in one hand. "Something different?" said the Martian, eyeing him with coffee, referring to them both, perhaps. "May I offer you a drink?" said Tomas. "Please." The Martian slid down from his machine. A second cup was produced and filled, steaming. Tomas held it out. Their hands met, and like mist, fell through each other. "Jesus Christ," cried Thomas, and dropped the cup. "Name of the gods," said the Martian in his own tongue. "Did you see what happened?" they both whispered. They were very cold and terrified. The Martian bent to touch the cup, but could not touch it. So what has happened, right? What's going on?
They now understand.
So they understand each other, right? But what seems to be happening? They can't touch.
Are they in different moments in time?
Yeah, right? Where did we begin? It smells like time, right? Right? So they're in different moments of time. Who's in the past? Who's in the future? It's unclear, right? But they somehow the chasm of time has been bridged, and they have this kind of brief moment where they're able to connect, right? And we're going to skip some of this, right? It's quite funny, but they accuse each other of being ghosts, right? And it goes back and forth for a little while. And they even argue over who's alive, who's not, that kind of thing. It's really quite funny. But let's see, we want to jump. Man, I'm sorry for the pagination being difficult, right? Let's jump over to page 84, right? Page 84. And so they've kind of mutually agreed that they were both alive at some point, though they don't know who was alive first, right? But it's more than just that. They're not even seeing the same thing. They can see each other, but they're not even seeing Mars at the same time. It's kind of weird, right? But it's very interesting and is worth kind of pondering. Do I have somebody who read for a few minutes? I know I do. Go for it. So let's pick up page 84. Let's pick up with broken.
Broken? Why, I see them perfectly. The moonlight helps, and the pillars are upright. There's dust in the streets, said Tomas. The streets are clean. The canals are empty right there. The canals are full of lavender wine. It's dead. It's alive, protested the Martian, laughing more now. Oh, you're quite wrong. See all the carnival lights? There are beautiful boats as slim as women, beautiful women as slim as boats. Women the color of sand, women with fire flowers in their hands. I can see them, small, running in the streets there. That's where I'm going now, to the festival. We'll float on the waters all night long. We'll sing, we'll drink, we'll make love. Can't you see it? Mister, that city is dead as a dried lizard. Ask any of our party. Me? I'm on my way to Green City tonight. That's the new colony we just raised over near Illinois Highway. You're mixed up. We brought in 1 million board feet of Oregon lumber and a couple dozen tons of good steel nails and hammered together 2 of the nicest little villages you ever saw. Tonight, we're warming one of them. A couple rockets are coming in from Earth, bringing our wives and girlfriends. There'll be barn dances and whiskey. The Martian was now disquieted. You say it is over that way? There are rockets. Tomas walked him to the edge of the hill and pointed down. See? No. Damn it, there they are. Those long silver things. No. Now Tomas laughed. You're blind. I see very well. You are the one who does not see. But you see the new town, don't you? I see nothing but an ocean and water at a low tide. Mister, that water's been evaporated for 40 centuries. Ah, now, that is enough. It's true, I tell you. The Martian grew very serious. Tell me again, you do not see the city the way I describe it? The pillars very white, the boats very slender, the festival lights? Oh, I see them clearly. And listen, I can hear them singing. It's no space away at all. Tomas listened and shook his head. No. And I, on the other hand, said the Martian, cannot see what you describe. Well, again they were cold, and ice was in their flesh.
All right, we'll stop there. What do we learn is happening here? What are they both on their way to? Louder. A party! Yeah, they're both on their way to a party, right? To a festival, right? To a festival. What is the significance of festivity, of festivals with time? Anybody know?
Prosperity?
Yeah, so maybe, right?
You mean like Joseph Pieper's theory of festivity?
Sure, yeah, we can talk about Pieper. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't it say that's kind of like the, is that the ultimate, like the fundamental celebration? I don't remember what exactly.
Oh, it's fine. You're on the right track, right? Festivals are an interruption of time, right? I mean, you think about it. What is if any of you have kids, right? Birthday parties, right? trying to plan a birthday party, or even just friends you try to plan a birthday party for. What's it take? Planning, pulling people out of their schedule, right? Any kind of festivity is, in fact, an interruption, right? A breaking into of the normalcy of time, right? Schools are this way, right? If you do any kind of school-wide festival, if you do a Thanksgiving thing, if you do a field day, going on field trips for individual classes, right? These things can feel very burdensome, particularly for teachers, right? Like you have so many things to plan and organize and get ready, but they are, or ought to be, a welcome interruption of the normal flow of time, right? And so it's very fitting that Bradbury chooses festivity to have time kind of collide, right? It's not just that, oh, they're both going to have a good time, but it's actually whole cultures engaged in this, right? And so this goes on for a little while. We don't have a ton of time, right? So we're gonna. Let's see. That was page 84. Let's go to page 86, right? So they kind of flesh this conversation out just a little bit more, right? And come to a kind of conclusion, right? I'm going to pick up top of page 86, first full paragraph. Who wants to see the future? Whoever does. A man can face the past, but to think, the pillars crumbled, you say? And the sea empty, and the canals dry, and the maidens dead, and the flowers withered? The Martian was silent, but then he looked on ahead. But they are there. I see them. Isn't that enough for me? They wait for me now, no matter what you say. And for Tomas, the rockets far away waiting for him, and the town and the women from earth. We can never agree, he said. Let us agree to disagree, said the Martian. What does it matter who is past or future, if we are both alive? For what follows will follow, tomorrow or in 10,000 years. How do you know that those temples are not the temples of your own civilization, 100 centuries from now, tumbled and broken? You do not know. Then don't ask. But the night is very short. There go the festival fires in the skies and the birds. Tomas put out his hand. The Martian did likewise in imitation. Their hands did not touch. They melted through each other. Will we meet again? Who knows? Perhaps some other night. I'd like to go with you to that festival. I wish I might come see your new town, to see this ship you speak of, to see these men, to hear all that has happened. Goodbye, said Thomas. Good night. The Martian rode his green metal vehicle quietly away into the hills. The Earthman turned his truck and drove it silently in the opposite direction. So, who comes first, right? It's never really made clear, but the point remains, they have a shared moment. They have this shared festival, and that's sufficient. That's enough, right? They could keep kind of pursuing these questions and keep digging deeper, and yet to do so might cause them to miss out on the thing that brought them together in the first place. It is the festival that connects them. It is the festival that enables them to bridge time in Bradbury's tale. But it's also the festival that beckons to them, right? What do they have in common? They have in common the festival, right? And one of the things that strikes me about Marr's books in particular is the way that they enable students, right, and maybe all readers, to see a mirror of themselves, but in a way that is somehow less foreign, despite its Martian aspect, right? Hand a child the Odyssey, right, which is a marvelous book, and everybody should read it. But you will have to work to get them to understand the Greek mindset, You have to invite them into a world that is totally foreign to them, that they will struggle to get into. Not that they can't get into it, not that they shouldn't get into it. They absolutely should, right? But it is going to be work for them. And yet, if you hand them the Martian Chronicles, despite its very foreignness, what they will find is themselves very easily, right? It will come naturally to them. I don't really know why. I have some thoughts, but we don't have time for that, right? And I think that this is a real benefit to engaging with this kind of literature, right? I'm not saying it should be engaged over the Odyssey. If you only have one book that you can read with your students, it should be the Odyssey, right? Let me make that very clear, right? Odyssey, Chronicles of Narnia, right? That's the working order, right? And it doesn't matter the age, right? Read the Odyssey with them when they're 5, read it with them when they're 15. But these kind of stories can help bring this out of them, right? And if we do have just a couple of minutes. Part of the reason why I think we should do this very specifically in an allowed form, right, is the ability to imagine. So Josh kind of beat me to this earlier, but when we read through Lewis, you work through the stages of revelation with Lewis as to who the Harassa are, right? When you first get to them, they're beasts. They're almost monstrous. They're a thing to be feared. But within just a few pages, you have moved to, it's a hand, it's a drink, it's a friend. This has a really powerful way of working out when done aloud, right? Like there is a real strong sense of how that can be drawn out because we more easily picture it. Does that make sense? Everybody follow that? Okay. Are we 40 or 50?
We should wrap.
Oh, we should wrap up. I'm getting the eye. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming. You can keep the packets. I hope you will go read these books.